Okay, we are calling to order the regular meeting of the Camarillo Planning Commission on this day, January 31st, 2023. If Secretary, please call roll.
Commissioner Talmadge.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy. Here. Commissioner Edsel.
Here.
Vice Chair Vandermeulen.
Here.
Chair Espinoza.
Here. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consent, which is 3 items on there. Are there any questions? Oh, prior to that, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Talmadge will lead us in that.
Please rise, face the flag, and follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I'm not in that big a hurry to be out of here. My apologies. So the consent item, which there's 3 items on there. Are there any questions from the Commissioner?
I had a question just on one of the items. Just wanted to clarify, I looked at all these and I'm fine with all of them, but on the amended Planning Commission bylaws, was that the only change on it, was the meeting time? There was nothing else on that red line set of changes, was there?
Oh.
Did I miss that?
No, actually, there's a recommendation for a committee disbandment, I think. Is that correct?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
For ordinance committee?
Yeah, so 2 items, I guess, on the
Yeah.
meeting time and no longer an ordinance committee.
The meeting time will remain at 6:30. The change is the removal of the 2 committees, the liaison committee and the ordinance committee.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, so.
Okay, any further? Okay, so there's 3 items. Also, on the minutes, there are 2 of the commissioners, myself included, who were not at the meeting of December 6th, and therefore we'd be normally abstaining on approving minutes. So just when we do the vote, that the record reflects that, and we are going to be voting on all 3 items.
Yeah, it's just to make sure the record's clear, is that it's Commissioner Talmadge and Chair Espinoza that will be abstaining from item A, but ready to vote on the E and C.
Yeah, so we'll all collectively vote on all 3 now. So if I can get a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved, seconded. We vote on consent. Okay, got 3-0. And our Oh, a little issue with so we're 5-0 on the consent with the inclusion, as we mentioned earlier, of an abstention on item A. Okay, moving on to public comments. This is the time for anyone in the public, if there's anyone here who wants to address the commission on anything not on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to do that. Do we have any speaker cards? Seeing no one come forward, we'll go ahead and close public comment period. And now we'll move on to public hearings. This is the CUP 416, conditional use permit, Dish Wireless. Can we have staff report?
Yes, thank you. Our staff presentation will be made by Melissa, our planning technician.
Good evening, Chairman Espinoza and members of the Planning Commission. I'd like to present a request from Jerry Ambrose with Yukon Group on behalf of Dish Wireless. They are requesting approval of a conditional use permit, CUP 416, for installation and operation of a new camouflaged wireless communications facility. The proposed location is in Bob Kildee Park at 1030 Temple Avenue. It's in the single-family residential zone and the general plan land use element designates it for community park use. This is a view of the project site from Temple Avenue looking east. The proposed location is at an existing light pole, which you can see in the middle of the picture. The plans propose to remove the existing 60-foot tall light pole and install a 63-foot tall light pole with camouflaged antennas. In 2005, the Planning Commission approved a non-camouflaged telecommunication wireless facility, CUP 274, on a different sports field light pole in Kildee Park. This was prior to the revised ordinance requiring camouflage for these facilities. You can see the existing facility here. It's located about 290 feet east of the proposed facility and is mounted on a 70-foot tall light pole. The proposed light pole and 144 square foot equipment enclosure are located next to the recreation building. The elevation drawings show the proposed pole and equipment enclosure next to the existing recreation building, stadium bleachers, and restroom facility. The photo simulation on the right shows what the proposed facility will look like. You'll notice that the antennas and radios are covered by radomes, which are the two cylindrical structures above and below the lights. The radomes are made from radio wave transparent materials and are designed to camouflage the antennas by matching the color of the light pole. The proposed equipment enclosure will have a block wall matching the walls of the adjacent restroom facility. The nearest residential property is 366 feet to the west and is well below the FCC's maximum permissible exposure, or MPE, limit for the general population. Based on worst-case predictive modeling, the EME report concluded that at the nearest walking and working surfaces, the maximum power density generated by the antennas is approximately 1.72% of the FCC's general public limit and 0.34% of the FCC's occupational limit. The EME report also modeled power density from the existing carrier plus the new carrier, called composite exposure. Any carrier with a new installation that contributes more than 5% of the applicable MPE must implement control measures. Based on the EME report, the new installation would not contribute more than 5% to composite exposure. This propagation map illustrates the individual contribution of the proposed facility, if approved. Dish Wireless is new to the wireless market, and they are attempting to build out their system to achieve complete coverage in Camarillo. Service thresholds are shown here. Urban areas in dark green are where subscribers are anticipated to have access to Dish service while indoors. Suburban areas in light green are where subscribers are anticipated to have service while in a vehicle. And outdoor areas in orange are where subscribers are anticipated to have service only while outdoors. This propagation map illustrates coverage with the individual plus proposed network of 7 planned facilities. If approved, this would be the third Dish Wireless facility in Camarillo. The project was reviewed in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the state CEQA guidelines, as well as the city's environmental guidelines. And it was determined to be categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA under Class 3 for new construction or conversion of small structures under CEQA Guidelines Section 15303. Staff recommends finding that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA and adoption of the resolution approving CUP 416, subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The action of the Planning Commission is final unless an appeal is filed within 10 days of the date of their action. That concludes the staff report on CUP 416. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for that report. I'll turn to my fellow commissioners. Questions of staff this time?
I don't think I have a question for staff, but I am wondering about how many more facilities are anticipated by this provider. There was a question from, well, I guess we'll get into that a little later, but at any rate, I don't think I have any questions for staff.
I think my questions are more for proposed person.
Applicant?
The applicant, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Talmadge, any questions?
I was curious if there's, sorry, got to press the right button. I was curious if there's any accommodation for sports equipment, balls, et cetera, going into the enclosure? Or is it enclosure covered on the top?
Yeah, so there wouldn't be any sports equipment or anything like that that would go in the enclosure. It would be just for the wireless facility. And there is typically on these, so that you can't see the top, they put a chain link fence roof. And that prevents anybody from being able to get into the enclosure and mess with the equipment, or from homeless people using it as an encampment. So it is really just block walls, 8 feet tall, with a chain link fence roof over the top of it that is below the actual height of the CMU wall.
So what's being proposed?
It's a 144 square foot CMU block wall enclosure with a chain link roof, and that's where the equipment is at.
Okay, so if equipment got in there, they wouldn't have to bring somebody else in to get it out?
You wouldn't be able to, the equipment wouldn't be able to get in there because it would land on top of the chain link fence that's the roof, basically, of the facility.
It's a lost ball?
Oh, it's chain link, so it's not, a ball's not going to be able to make it through there. I mean, baseballs, I mean, something like a golf ball would make it through, but not a baseball or basketball or anything like that.
Okay.
Commissioner Herzl.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be helpful to go again every time we get one of these, what the, the federal versus local ordinance, what we can't do, because we're, as far as the emissions and things, are there certain things we can't consider because federal trumps our local ordinances?
So the Planning Commission is not allowed to deny one of these projects based on potential health effects from the emissions exposure, as long as it's under the FCC's general public limit.
And then I guess the follow-up is one of these public comments that we receive. Maybe we have to wait till the public part of that, but she talks about that there's several more that are planned, and is in the analysis, do they ever consider the cumulative effect, or do they just look at one at a time in isolation, or is that something that we can't even consider?
When a new facility is proposed, they will look at the cumulative effect from all facilities in that area.
And so who does that? Do they get some sort of independent report?
Yes.
Yeah, every time, one of the requirements for a wireless application is that they submit a EME report that has got predictive modeling for the new facility. And then if there are existing facilities, they basically get the antenna information from those facilities, and they add that into the predictive modeling report, and then determine the cumulative effect from all the facilities in the area.
So is there a certain level where then under the federal rules, it wouldn't be approved? I mean, I guess they figure that into the reporting that they do.
They do, and so the report in general will have the cumulative maximum permissible exposure. And in this particular case, they actually did take that other facility that's in Bob Kildee Park into account, and it was less than 5% contribution to any of the exposure to any of the EME fields being generated, and therefore it wasn't even a consideration, because these the wattage power of these signals fall off so quickly, and these things are so distant from one another that the cumulative effect is negligible.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
With respect to the federal requirements, the FCC's regulations are going to control. It's going to preempt state and local laws, and that has two implications. One is the city is not going to be able to regulate emissions regulations. It's not going to be able to impose its own emissions regulations. And secondly is that the city's not going to be able to deny an application based on emissions regulations, as long as the applicant complies with FCC regulations.
Okay, thank you.
All right, understood. Anything further, Mr. Edsel? Okay, a couple of questions. Now, one of the special conditions is a lockout, tagout requirement for any work on the antenna itself, so forth. I have a question about the lights on that actual pole. Who normally changes these lights out when there's a
The
need?
PVRPD, this is PVRPD property, and they have contractors that they work with in order to change out the lights when necessary.
Okay. So if that becomes necessary on that particular pole location. The process, procedure would be what for PVRPD?
So there is a notification on the pole at ground level that lets people know that this pole has wireless facilities at the top of it, and it then provides a number to call to notify the wireless server, the service provider, that they need to access the pole. And then the people are appropriately trained to be able to go up the pole, and if necessary, they will shut the system down for the maintenance that's required.
Okay. So there will be signage at the base of the pole for
Yes.
anybody who might,
The EME report
that.
requires, includes recommendations for where notifications and signage needs to go to make sure that everybody is protected, both general population as well as occupational people that would work on the pole. So they would see this notification at the base of the sign and before they can, at the location that they would start climbing. So they would know that the facility is up there and and then the number would be there for them to call.
understood. Okay. And I realize also it does, as we've seen other applications of this nature come through, they do require them to go out 60 days after construction and do an actual site measuring to make sure that they are in fact under these FCC requirements as far as the amount of emissions that are occurring, right?
Yes, that's correct, and they have to report it back to the city.
Okay. And there isn't necessarily going to be any monitoring beyond that, right? I mean, FCC maybe might come out on an annual basis or every 5 years or whatever the case may be, but beyond that, there's no way of determining whether everybody who's around that pole and at the base of the pole, since it's at a baseball field and it's a trafficked area, which a lot of cell towers are not, but there's not expected to be any sort of monitoring after that 60-day measuring? So
There typically would not be any monitoring. What our experience in Camarillo is that the technology on some of this equipment is changing so often that within 1 or 2 years, they will be asking to upgrade radio units or antennas based on new technology. And at that point, it becomes an administrative modification that staff would handle. And that's, again, a requirement of the FCC that on administrative modifications, less than substantial change, that it be handled administratively. When that does happen, though, even administratively, we require the new predictive EME report, and then a followed up with another 60-day report after that. So anytime they make a change, that is one of our requirements and conditions of approval. In addition to that, ultimately, when it comes down to this, every single provider is broadcasting on certain frequencies, and the equipment has limitations on its power that it can broadcast at. So in watts is how it's measured, or effective radiated power. So those limitations are what the worst case predictive modeling are going towards on these reports. So they're saying if this facility were pumped up to its maximum possible power levels, that's what we're getting in these EME reports. So most often, these things don't actually have to be pumped up to their maximum power, and the only reason that they start getting pumped up to higher power levels that start to reach their maximum is because they're getting to a point where they are becoming bogged down with bandwidth of things coming in and out of the network, the airwaves, and so it becomes about quantity. That's when they start having to boost the power on them. Again, Dish Wireless, if this facility were the only one that's going to be going into the city of Camarillo, this would always be at its maximum power. But ultimately, Dish Wireless is trying to build out a total of about 8 throughout the city, maybe eventually 10, and that should give them complete coverage over the city of Camarillo. And at that point, you know, until they start having way more wireless devices on their network, they're not going to have to boost the power. And when it does get to the point where they would have to start boosting their power, they're going to start looking for densification by starting to put in small cells.
Okay, understood. Very good. And I assume that there's probably contract services, like if a year down the road, maybe there's a public concern that comes to the city about, you know, hey, are we safe? Is this safe? And that contract services could be obtained to take measurements and to put everybody at ease, that sort of thing?
We always have the ability within the code to request that they do a new EME report, a field study to EME report. And we also have a third-party contractor contract with the city that actually evaluates those reports, because our technical expertise isn't really what it needs to be to properly evaluate a field study. So we actually charge the provider to have that report evaluated by a third-party contractor to make sure that we're understanding it and that it's accurate.
All right, thank you.
I would like to note, since you mentioned the emissions for people walking near the bottom of that pole, that worst case predictive modeling, the maximum power density generated at that nearest walking area is less than 2% of the FCC's general limit.
Right, yeah. I mean, we understand, I mean, especially, it's kind of, I guess, widely said that, you know, beyond 25 feet, you're normally safe from these types of antennas as far as distance and exposure levels and so forth. But it doesn't mean people won't get uncomfortable about it or might raise questions. So I just wanted to address that. Okay, any further questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on this. Does the applicant want to address the commission?
Works, okay. Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Ambrose. I'm here on behalf of Dish Wireless. I actually don't have anything to add to staff's presentation. We did work closely with staff to come up with this particular design, hopefully acceptable to your commission, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant?
I do.
Commissioner Murphy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have a letter that's in opposition to this from Ms. Schmidt, Lynn Schmidt, who is concerned about the overall impact with all the facilities. So the first question that she has that I'm aware of is how many facilities do you think will be spread out through the city? I think we just heard from Paul that number might be 8 to 10.
Yeah,
Does that sound?
I am personally only working on one additional project, but there are other companies like my consulting company that work for Dish.
Okay.
I'm working on one that's over at the Outlets Mall. That's the only one that I have on my plate right now. Plus
Okay. Did you work on the one on Arneal, the one on Arneal near the freeway? That's on top of the
I did, actually. That's for another carrier.
yeah, I thought I saw you before.
The one that's under construction now?
That's another carrier?
Yeah, that's AT&T.
Okay. And so then the other concern was just this overall cumulative effect. So it sounds, in reading through the report, that when you're outside of any of these facilities by, say, 100 feet, 200 feet, there's no radiation or harmful effects on the ground. Is that true, or am I'm not meaning to generalize?
As noted in the report, 1.72% of the SCC standard. So that's obviously very low. And the next tower down would have something similar. And there's no cumulative, let's say it's 3% then, if you add them both up. I mean, it's really, really low as
What?
compared to the FCC standard.
Right. So does it just die out after a few hundred feet? I mean, to zero? Or could there be a cumulative effect where you're, I don't know, building, if you say you have 10 facilities or 20 facilities in the city, is there, I don't know, a residual
Well,
that
if you're
could be-
looking at impacts at the ground, so the closest spot on this particular project and others like it is under 2%. And the antennas are in the air, so they propagate out. And it gets less and less as you go out. Now, I'm not an engineer, so I can't say it goes to zero, but it does dissipate.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like, and I'm not an electrical engineer either. I'm pretty far afield from this, but it does, reading through the report, sound like it dissipates within a few hundred feet.
Rapidly, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the correct term is rapidly, yes.
All right, thank you.
Vice Chair Vandermeer.
Can we go back to the picture of the light, the proposed pole for a minute? Okay. So what I was reading, if I was reading right, that there were going to be 3 8-foot bars. Are those for the lights? Are there still going to be a triangular bar going around there where we see lights in the middle?
Yeah, there are 3 antennas, 8-foot tall antennas within that radome facility. And then there are what are called remote radios. They work in concert with the antennas. Those are in the radome, what we call a radome below the lights.
So what I'm looking at is the radomes are the facilities for the digital are above and below.
Correct.
And that's one of the light posts. Are there going to be 2 more light posts on there, or is that the only light post?
That's it. That's the final project right there.
Okay, so there's nothing now planned that's 3 8-foot posts going around the pole?
No, all
bars.
those antennas that you're referencing are all included in the radome at the top.
Okay, that's where I was confused between what I was looking at in the folder and what I'm seeing there. So then, at the bottom of that's far enough, I don't know how far that is down to the ground, but that's still going to be high enough to be above any danger areas?
Yeah, those
the
are
people
remote
below?
radios. Yeah, those are not the antennas
Okay,
themselves.
so the antennas
They
are
aren't
all
propagating the
above?
signal, correct.
Okay,
As you probably all know, the park and rides along the freeway, there are antenna poles there. That's essentially what we're talking about. We call those radomes, those enclosures at the top of those light poles at the park and rides.
okay. This looked different than what I thought I was looking at
Okay.
in our schematics that we were looking
It's
at.
a little different, yeah. We work with staff to try to come up with something as slim and as narrow as possible, and that's what we came up with.
Okay. So the only lights are on the bar that just goes straight across?
Yeah, what you see there is what the project will be.
Okay.
There's nothing additional to what you're seeing there.
And they're going to be enough to light up the fields and
Yes.
the walkway below?
Yeah, the Park District will absolutely guarantee that happens.
Okay. Then do you know how much distance it is from this pole to the existing pole across the field?
Oh, the AT&T pole, I'd rough guess of 300 to 400 feet. Paul or staff might know better.
It's 290 feet from the existing pole at that
Okay,
park.
well, that was a pretty good guess, I guess.
Very, very good. And then we have the difference in height. The original pole is so much higher, but was that only because it's not enclosed and it had to be higher? Or,
The original pole was 60 feet tall, and the
No.
proposed,
no, I mean, the AT&T pole, that's 70 feet tall. So is that because it was unenclosed, it needed to be higher? Is this one okay to be shorter because it's enclosed?
So basically what's being done here is they're building off what's currently there and existing, which is whatever PVRPD installed. So the 70 feet on the existing one are because all the other lights around the park are also 70 feet?
Okay. I didn't know if that was a difference or why it was different and why this one didn't need to be as tall as the other one. Okay, I think my other questions I had have already been answered, so I'm good.
Any further questions, applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Ambrose. So we do have a written comment that was submitted, but I understand the author is here. Did you want to address the planning commission at the podium? And if you have a speaker card when you're done, that would be appreciated.
Do what?
When you can complete a speaker card.
All right.
Thank you.
As you mentioned, my name is Lynn Schmidt. I was the individual that you were referring to with some of your questions, and I do appreciate the fact that I was able to submit this email. I didn't know if I had courage enough to come tonight, but I appreciate the fact that you read it and you brought the questions to the meeting. So you eliminated at least part of what I was going to ask tonight. You've already heard my concerns about safety in the community. I've lived here 52 years, and I live very close to the park. Had kids play soccer and baseball and go to the Boys and Girls Club and the library and the schools. So I do have some concern about all of the frequencies that are going to be running over our heads. My first request is a respectful request that there be a list of all the existing operational or non-operational stealth or camouflaged wireless communication facilities in Camarillo in our environs, along with the carrier names, and this be kept up to date and it be available to the public. Because what I am hearing is that each carrier represents themselves. They have their own network, and how many are we going to end up with total? Because A&T has its network and Dish Wireless has its network, and other people come in and possibly request their own networks. So if we could have, I remember, I think at the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, you asked for a total, and it could not be answered. So it would be nice to know, with all the carriers applying for their conditional use permits, how many are there already? And how many are we going to end up with? And that goes to my next request, which would be, as you are the Planning Commission, that there be some kind of interim plan generated for maybe at least 5 years to the future to establish some kind of annual maximum amount of stealth or wireless towers that are new or upgraded or existing, so that we don't end up with, again, not knowing how many of these facilities we have, where are they, and who is operating them. If we could have some kind of idea of year to year how many are going to be added to Camarillo, I think it would be helpful. You answered my question about the 60-day reports. I was wondering if there were going to be annual reports, or if after the 60-day report is done, it's done. So you've answered that question, and I appreciate that. There is little known, I think, about, my research showed that there's little known about the effects of frequencies on humans. That will probably change as we move more to using more of the wireless systems, and I appreciate your due diligence.
All right. Thank you so much for your suggestions and for being here at the meeting tonight. And we appreciate it, and staff will be making notes of. Thank you. And any further comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this. And I'll turn to the architectural review for a report, committee report.
We met earlier for the architectural review, and that was the focus of that meeting, and we deemed that the building is compatible with existing. It looks like it's part of what's already built, and because of that, we approved it from an architectural standpoint.
Very well, thanks. Finally, Commissioner, final comments, questions?
I just wondered, was staff going to comment on some of the questions our last speaker had, or is that, were you going to respond to that?
Mr. Chairperson, if I may, in response to some of the public comments that were made, I would reiterate that the FCC, Federal Commission's, the FCC regulates wireless telecommunications facilities, and it's going to preempt state and local law in respect to the number of wireless sites that could be built. Specifically, the city cannot implement a ban or any regulations that would impose a significant gap in coverage.
So how about the list? Is that something readily available, how many we have in town, or is that something that city doesn't compile that data?
So we do not, at the moment, compile that data, but we have been, since we've been receiving a lot of requests for new facilities, we are maintaining those records. And we are looking back to see how many we were approved in the past, but we don't have that readily available at this time.
Thank you.
Just to answer, if I could answer maybe part of that question, we have approved 40 wireless facilities in Camarillo so far. They haven't all necessarily been built. A handful of them have been approved very recently.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, I think that Ms. Schmidt's idea of developing a master list for all the facilities in town, it was actually two parts. One is for all the facilities that are in town, and also a list of the projected more towers in the future is a good one. If it's not an onerous task, I think it would be a good idea to produce that list. And that's my comment on that.
When it comes to the projection is going to be controlled by the market and the number of wireless devices. So as a carrier starts seeing more and more wireless devices come online, because all your grandkids and my child and everybody's wanting to stream ultra high definition movies, it's going to require more and more facilities. The facilities are going to be, at this point, we're talking about macro level facilities. But as more and more wireless devices come online, where your refrigerator is talking to your phone when you're at the grocery store, it's going to require densification of the network, which is going to require that there also be small cells to start filling in the gaps. So ultimately, it's going to be driven by demand in the market, and that's very hard to predict. So we really wouldn't be able to say how many towers there may eventually be. But as it's been mentioned, all of this is under the regulation of the FCC.
Okay. How about a list of the facilities that we already have and just keeping track as they come online?
We have a little bit of additional research to do because, as was mentioned, not every facility that is applied for actually ends up getting built. And some facilities, there have actually been some facilities that have shut down in Camarillo because of for instance, the facility was built on private property and the person chose not to extend the lease to the wireless carrier, and so that had to be basically shut down and taken down. So we have to we basically generally know how many there are and where they are at, but we're double checking to make sure that they still exist, that they're still active and functional, and that they actually got built.
All right, thank you.
So we're nearly there.
Yep.
Vice Chair Van?
I have just one more question, possibly for Mr. Ambrose. But I'm pretty sure I asked this question at the last time, since this is Dish Network. Is this just going to like the television type networks, or is Dish going into cell phones?
Mr. Chairperson, I'm sorry if I may.
Yes.
commission is going to open the public
Oh,
hearing.
okay.
Well, the commission would have to open the public hearing to address
That's
the
true.
public, including the applicant again.
Never-
Yeah, so we need a question and answer, so we're going to reopen public hearing on this item.
Yeah, this is, as we talked about before, Dish is building out a new wireless network. They're essentially becoming the fourth carrier because Sprint went away when
Okay.
T-Mobile bought Sprint. So as part of all that arrangement, Dish will now be the fourth wireless carrier choice for the public.
Okay. I apologize for the late question, but I didn't write it down on my list, so.
No, that's quite all right. Any further questions of the applicant? Okay. With that, we'll close the public hearing again. Any other questions, Commissioner? Comments? I just want to say that I think that it is a very, reasonable suggestion to try and have a publicly available inventory of these sites. If understanding that there are, various kinds of cell towers, or cell services, or different types of networks, 5G, which is going to be like closer in proximity, maybe more in number at some point when all that infrastructure gets put in. But I think it's just something that might be important to research and see what's possible to be making publicly available for information of that nature that will be of concern to the public. With that, we can go ahead and start with the reading of a resolution.
Resolution number PC 2023-2, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a request for a conditional use permit for Dish Wireless for the construction of a camouflage wireless communications facility located at 1030 Temple Avenue in the single-family residential zone, further described as CUP 416.
I'll make a motion to waive further reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to waive further reading and vote for adoption. Please vote. That passes 5-0. Thank you very much for staff and the applicant. And with that, we move on to presentations now.
Okay. So we could stand here, and I would love to have written, like a big, long, grand speech, but I did take a few just little notes, just really brief. So we started this journey 4 years ago. From start to finish, as your chair of the Planning Commission, you've been a valuable addition to the team. I know I've personally learned a lot from you. With your background in fire safety and your perspectives on the properties that we've made decisions on. While this might be the end of this journey for you, I know that you have other valuable volunteer work that you're involved with. I see you as a person who will always work to make things better in whatever you do. So thank you for your friendship and sharing your knowledge with all of us. And I just want you to know you're greatly appreciated. So we have a plaque for Luis that says, Chairman of the Planning Commission, or an appreciation to Luis Espinoza, Chairman of the Planning Commission, City of Camarillo, from January 18th, 2022 through January 17th, 2023, and presented by the City of Camarillo Planning Commission at their meeting on January 17th, 2023. So with that, I really do want to thank you. I've enjoyed working with you. I've enjoyed being with you at conferences and really have learned a lot from you. So thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Well, it was a very, fantastic experience personally for me to have been, first of all, I really want to thank our past council member, Charlotte Craven, who appointed me to the commission 4 years ago. You know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for that type of dedication. She served the city for 36 years, and I was very honored to be appointed by her to do this, understanding, knowing when she did, that she would be retiring in 4 years' time, and that this would be a one-term thing, which was going to be fine with me, but I'd say the time of the past 4 years of being able to work with staff, getting to know all my fellow commissioners, really makes it hard to leave and makes it hard to, walk out the door. But it's been a fantastic experience. I appreciate all the work that city staff does. I've worked in government myself, and that is my background. And I can't say enough about the work that you do here in the city, and I'm really proud to be a part of this city and to have been part of the projects that we've approved the past 4 years, and look forward to seeing them come to fruition. I can't say enough about these individuals here to my side that were so wonderful to work with and on and off the court, I guess you'd say it in my tennis lingo. But thank you so much. And with that, we move on to some presentations for outgoing members, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Chair Espinoza. So we also have additional hardware to hand out tonight, so if Commissioner Talmadge and Chair Espinoza could join me over by the screen here.
It's really a neat plaque.
Don't have a mic, so I'm trying to talk really loud. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'd like to thank both Commissioner Talmadge and Chair Espinoza for their service. As Vice Chair Vandermeulen was mentioning, 4 years ago, you guys joined our team here, and boy, what a ride it was. So in 2019, I feel like I have my back to everybody, but in 2019, we came in, it was your first year, you had some training, you went to the Planning Commissioners Academy, you went to the League of California Cities, and then bam, COVID hit. And it really changed our whole world. It kind of changed it, turned it upside down. And as for 2020, we were trying to figure out how we were going to operate meetings. So that took a little while, and then we all heard of this new thing called Zoom. And we had to conduct our meetings on Zoom and have, public comment, and, people still had their permits and they wanted approval, and so we had to work through that. And then to make matters even worse, in 2021, we had hybrid meetings where we had people that could come in and and they're on Zoom also, and we had these partitions here, and we could barely hear each other talk. And so it was a unique experience for me going through that, but with your guys' leadership and drive and commitment and your experience that you had, Chairman Espinoza, you brought the life safety, the fire aspect of it, and you're asking us questions about how that aerial ladder is going to get to that second story and, help that. And Commissioner Talmadge, you with the CEQA, calling me up, a couple days before the meeting going, how did you come to that? So, and, definitely keeping us on our toes. So, but we appreciate it because we've evolved and we keep getting better, and that's kind of our motto here is, we always want to enhance it, be transparent and continually improve. So, some examples of, from your leadership that we've, kind of implemented, throughout the 4-year period was, you guys asked us to beef up our traffic, analysis a little bit and kind of highlight some of the key components in there. So we've done that, and another thing, and tonight's a key, example of that is you guys need to beef up your analysis and your presentations with wireless, because we have a lot of questions. So we've done that, but we'll continue to grow. But I want to thank you guys, personally, and for the city of Camarillo and the residents for your leadership and your time and your commitment to this planning commission. So thank you very much. So if you get around and then Dean, here's yours. Great. And then
One, two, scoot over a little bit. 1, 2, 3. Cool. Thank you. And then if you want, I'll take one back here too.
If you guys want to make any comments, I know you kind of already. So we don't have a mic, but if you want to, or you want to do it over, yeah, that'll work.
And we'll recess it.
Yeah, and then we'll.
We're gonna stand here and take a picture.
Yeah.
Let's stand here.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Do you want a picture with this?
Oh, yeah. That'd be good. Sure.
That's pretty fancy.
Thank you.
Here's your chair back.
Okay, we're just finishing up with a few final comments here. Commissioner Talmadge wants to say a few words, and any other commissioners that'd like to say anything, and then we'll break for recess after that.
I promise to only have a few words, unlike other times. But first off, I want to thank Sean Mulkey. He's in the audience, and he was the one that appointed me. And he and I came in together looking at, well, what do we do now? And we talked about a lot of things, and we had a wonderful ride together. And for his own reasons, he did not run for re-election. And for those reasons and others, it's time for me to move on down the road. But I want to say, first off, there was outstanding support from the city staff, from Director Joe Vaca on down, through all the people for correcting either something I'd done wrong or me correcting something they may have missed or whatever. But it was a lot of fun in playing. And then, of course, were my fellow commissioners. 3 of us were new at the time, and we mumbled and fumbled and stumbled and had a great time. COVID hit, and we got through that. And we're now free. So thank you all very much for your help, support, and to the Planning Commission. And I know that you'll provide the same kind of support to the new people appointed, and I wish them good luck. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Commissioner Insel.
I just wanted to comment, thank you guys and congratulations on the 4 years you spent. I really enjoyed working with you guys and going to conferences and getting to know you. And we see over and over again that it's the way this commission's set up with people from all different backgrounds, that there's so much contribution, because at every meeting, it seemed like everybody would come up with questions and things that I hadn't even considered, based on our backgrounds and the way we're viewing it. And Gene, with his expertise in this area too, I think I learned a lot. At our conferences for the last many years, I've taken the CEQA classes every time, and I still don't always get CEQA, but I know Gene's kind of an expert on that. We could help that. And then Luis, with his fire background, seemed like in a lot of the focus on the building, things we didn't even consider. Luis was looking at access and the ability to turn around a fire truck and how to get up to that next story and stuff. So everybody's input was so valuable, and we're going to miss you guys. It was fun working with you, and look forward to working with the new commissioners as well to start that next chapter. But congratulations and best of luck to both of you. And we'll see you around town. So.
Of course.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Is this on? Yeah, it is. Congratulations to both of you. It's been wonderful working with you these last 4 years. I can't think of a panel that would be more diversified than the one we have, although the incoming commissioners also will bring their own expertise in different fields, and I'm excited about that as well. But I'm going to miss both of you. Gene, I've tried to learn from your style. You have a way of, before you ask questions, you lay a foundation for the question, and that helps, fellow commissioners and staff and applicant and the general public understand where your questions are coming from. And I've tried to do a little bit more of that myself as I go along, but my skill set does not match yours in that area. So thank you, and I'll continue to try to get better at that. And Luis, your expertise with your fire protection background, you always think of things regarding safety and access that I don't think of, and tonight was no exception. When you asked about, well, what about the parks people going up and replacing the light bulbs up there, how is that going to work? It occurred to me that there'll be maintenance people for the facility itself. It did not enter my head that parks people will actually be going up there, and they'll need to be able to be protected as well. You did that every meeting, and I appreciate that. But plus, just working with you guys was a true pleasure and privilege. So thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I've mentioned a little bit to Luis, but Jane, also, you really brought me into the field here. I've learned so much from you. You helped me get started, even just running the architectural committee, analysis. Okay, how do I do this and what are we doing? Because I was brought on kind of at the last minute and wasn't familiar with the Planning Commission as much as I was with City Council. So I just can't thank you enough for sharing all your information and being able to just listen to you when you analyze things or talk about things and learn a whole lot more about what's important and what we're looking at and what we're reading. And it's just been a great help to me, and, as well as Luis with the safety things and what we've done. But it's just been wonderful for me just working with all of you, this last 4 years, and how much I have learned and how much we've all shared and learned from each other. So, it's been great. And I do look forward to figuring out how much more I'm going to learn in the next 4 years with our 2 additional commissioners coming on. So, as far as I know, I think we still have another mix of talents to come in and backgrounds. So it's, I think it's going to work out, but I will miss both of you. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to say to the new incoming commissioners that, aside from welcome, that I know that you're going to enjoy it and that you're going to add a lot to this commission. And let it put you at ease that even in my last meeting, I can skip right through a Pledge of Allegiance in the agenda. So with all that training and with all that, you just never know. So it's good to stay humble and to keep an open mind. Honestly, being on the commission it was the learning experience from meeting to meeting. There was always something new to learn from every single project and every single applicant that comes to the city, and all the work that goes on behind the scenes to get those applications from the initiation to the commission. A lot of work goes into that, and so there's a lot to learn. So I appreciate your willingness to step up and to serve in that capacity. And with that, we'll call for recess now.
Lamone, thank you. So we're off to a new start with some new commissioners, and we'll have a great year. So first order of business is selection of chair and vice chair. So do we have, this is what I'm doing, right? I have nominations for chair.
I nominate our Vice Chair, Beverly, to be the chair for this upcoming year.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Oh, I'll happily second that
Okay.
motion.
And then I'll move that we close the nomination on that.
And I'll second that.
Okay, then we can all vote. This is backwards. Okay.
She was sweating it there for a minute.
It's like, there's an extra light here.
Oh, is it? You want a second?
Yeah, it was extra. All right, then we'll go on to vice chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Dave Edsall for vice chair.
Any other nominations?
I'll second that.
Okay. We'll close the nominations. Then would you vote, please? Okay. So Dave.
Just in case you're.
Okay, then next we go on to selection of the Architectural Review Committee. And I would like to nominate or appoint, if possible, Tom Murphy and Rob Davison. So would you two be willing to accept those positions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then we do not need a vote for that, as far as I understood. Correct? Yes, okay. And so now we're going to staff introductions. Mr. Secretary.
Okay, thank you, Chair Vandermeulen. So we'd like to have our planning staff come up and just kind of briefly introduce themselves, and maybe if they have a mask on, because we're required to wear it, some of us, just kind of show your face and say the name and your title and kind of what you do for the city in your role as a planner here for the city of Camarillo. So Brett, you want to start us off?
Good evening, Commission. My name is Brett McMahon. I'm a community development intern here at the City of Camarillo. I've been here for half a month now, and it's been a tremendous experience so far. I love working here, and I'm excited for all that's to come down the road for me. So thank you.
Thank you, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy working here.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Jackie Lee, and I'm the Planning Manager. I've been with the city for over 15 years. It's an awesome city. I look forward to working with the new commissioners and our existing commission. And I oversee current and long-range planning, so we have a lot of exciting projects that we're going to be bringing forward to you this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Good evening. I'm one of the lucky ones that has to wear a mask at the moment, but let me just pull my mask down for a second. My name is Mike Sepak. I'm the associate planner here. I've been with the city for just over a year. I started as a planning technician. I work on current planning, and I also work with David and James on housing. So thank you. Nice to meet you guys, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm James Fowler. I started just in August, but it's been a wonderful ride so far. I'm the housing planner, and I should be back before you quite soon with some legislation, some updates in response to the legislation. So nice to meet all you new faces.
Thank you for the warning.
Hello, my name is Melissa Beebe. I'm a planning technician. I've been working here for a little over 6 months, and I've really enjoyed working here, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Congratulations. Welcome to the Planning Commissioner, Commissioner Davidson and Commissioner Limon. My name is Mitchell Morrison. I'm an assistant planner. Been at the city over a year now, and I work 2 days a week. I'm on the front counter, so you'll see my smiling face up there. It's the place to go for basic permits, zone clearances, special event permits, type of over-the-counter permits like zoning approvals. And then 3 days a week, I work on current planning projects. So I have some projects that are under construction, like Camarillo Village Homes. We're doing condition compliance, like Trojan Storage, that's under construction. And I also have some industrial plan development projects and commercial projects that are in my portfolio for current planning responsibilities.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Paul McLaren. I am the senior planner here in Camarillo. I've been here just over 2 years. I work both mostly current planning, but also some long-range planning. I'm working along with Side Jackie. We're working on the climate action plan and the update to the safety element. But then you'll see me also here to support some of the staff, especially when it comes to some of the technical matters like we had tonight. So I look forward to working with each and every one of you, and I think it's going to be a great year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is David Moe. I'm the Assistant Director. I've been here now for just over 7 years, I believe. It's gone by very fast. It's a fast tempo. We have a heavy workload, and you guys will see a lot of projects coming your way, kind of as James alluded to, that there's a whole bunch of housing legislation that was just recently passed, so we're scrambling to get that in place, and we're trying to get our everything with our grants and all the projects that are being submitted. So it's exciting, but honestly, that's why I came here. Before Camarillo, I was in Moore Park, but I wanted to work on projects that you had here in Camarillo. So, and then if we could have our director, Joe Vaca, come up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moe. Well, welcome Commissioner Limon and Commissioner Davidson, and then of course, welcome back Planning Commissioners. We're so excited to have you all with us. We also have a new Assistant City Attorney, Justin Tamayo. So Mr. Tamayo, welcome aboard. We look forward to working together. And as you can see, we're very blessed and have a great staff that's newer staff, but very eager to learn, committed to working together. We have excellent staff that we collaborate with in our Public Works Department, so momentarily I'm sure you'll also get an introduction from Mrs. Tucker. So we look forward to continuing the trends that have been long established here in Camarillo, which is to collaborate with all the departments and divisions in City Hall to bring forward the best projects for the community for your consideration. And then, of course, truly appreciate your volunteerism and putting in the time and energy that makes this such a wonderful place to live and work. So look forward to working together.
Thank you.
And last but not least, no. Hi, good evening. I'm Tally Tucker. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Works and the City Engineer. I've been with the city coming up on 29 years, and I've been supporting the Planning Commission twice a month, whenever there's a meeting for 29 years, so in this very seat. Anyway, I enjoy it. Camarillo is a wonderful place to live and work, and I enjoy meeting everyone that comes, so I'm sure I'll get to know you, Rob, and you, Gladys, and welcome aboard. And it's been a pleasure serving the rest of you for all this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Janessa. I am the Management Assistant for Community Development, and I've been here for 5 years, and it's a great city to work for, and I really enjoy everybody, and I'm excited to work with all of you.
And we love your help. Thank you. And that's all the introductions that I see. So then we can go on to Planning Commissioner training.
All right. Thank you, Chair Van der Meulen. So we have 4 presentations tonight. We're going to start off with CEQA. It's our first presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mitchell Morrison. My objective is to orient you to the California Environmental Quality Act in 10 minutes or less. We'll call it CEQA for the remainder of the evening. I have written a poem about it, and I've been encouraged to share it, and I'll just give an appetizer with the first stanza that all time allows for. but the poem begins with, consultants, attorneys, and agencies all have their say on what CEQA is, means, and what role it should play. But why does this statute I have studied and read often leave me stumped and scratching my head? I think I've nailed concepts firmly in my mind, and they just slip through my fingers. You know, you can study CEQA for years and years, and there's always more to learn. So maybe time will permit the rest of the poem at some future date, but let's get right down to business. Here's our agenda. What is CEQA? How does CEQA work? And what is a planning commissioner's role in CEQA? So beginning with, what is CEQA? It is a state statute, it is policy, and it is guidelines. There are three parts there. A brief timeline, President Nixon signs NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, into law in 1970. Only 9 months later, Governor Reagan signs CEQA into law, and then it's the seminal Friends of Mammoth versus Mono County case in September 22nd, 1972, that really gives CEQA teeth, because the statutory interpretation from this case is that CEQA applies to private projects, not just government projects or state projects, but private projects on private land that require a public permit, a permit from a public agency, I should say. Brings us to May 2020, the City Council in Camarillo adopts CEQA environmental guidelines that are particular to the city of Camarillo. So prior to coming to work here, I was a private CEQA consultant at a firm for 8 years, and I had never seen a city council adopt their own CEQA thresholds, and it's part of the reason I came to work at the city of Camarillo. That brings us to today in 2023 and the discretionary projects that will be brought before you for you to vote on. So I'll start with CEQA being a state statute. It is legislation. It's codified in state law in Section 2100 of the Public Resources Code. And the purpose here is really that CEQA assists you as decision makers in identifying the significant effects of projects, and if there are mitigation measures to avoid or lessen those significant impacts. CEQA is public policy. What I mean by this is there are at least two purposes of CEQA. One is to prevent environmental damage, and the other is to provide a decent home and satisfying environment for every Californian. As you can imagine, sometimes there's a tension between preventing environmental damage and reducing impacts while also providing housing, as evidenced by the current California housing crisis. CEQA is local to Camarillo, as I mentioned. There's specific environmental guidelines that define what is and what is not a significant impact in Camarillo. So those were adopted by the City Council in 2020, and they encompass the unique character, composition, and geography of Camarillo. And this document won the Outstanding Environmental Resource Document in 2021 from the California Association of Environmental Professionals. How does CEQA work? Well, you think about it here. What is the purpose of CEQA? Is it to mitigate impacts, or is it public disclosure? There's really not a right answer on that. A lot of people think it's one or the other. It's actually both. CEQA requires mitigating impacts that are significant on the environment, and also requires public disclosure and noticing. So how CEQA works is it's about documentation, mitigation, and litigation. Developers and opponent groups love to litigate lead agencies, so it's very important that the administrative record is clear and shows the findings I'll get into. This is a pretty simplified CEQA process slide. I've tried to boil it down. It's really the first decision that needs to be made is whether a project is a project under CEQA. If a project has the potential to have significant physical impacts on the environment, then it's a project under CEQA. If it's, I was thinking, what's a practical example of not a project? Routine, CEQA says it's administrative actions undertaken by government agencies like budgets, routine administrative actions that don't have a potential for a significant impact on the environment. That's not a project. If it is a project, the public agency and staff will determine if it's exempt. There's different paths it can take for exemptions, but if it's not exempt, the public agency needs to evaluate the project to see what the significant impacts are and what effect they would have on the environment. If there is a potentially significant impact, the lead agency needs to prepare an environmental document. Now, you'll see these documents in your agenda packets, if there is one involved. To illustrate this point, I created this overlay here. The means by which a project is evaluated is in an initial study, and if there is one impact, so let's say biological resources, then the lead agency will prepare what's called an environmental impact report, a mitigated negative declaration, or a negative declaration. And that is a document you'll find in your agenda reports. There's 3 different types of CEQA documents, just generally speaking. If there are significant impacts, it's an EIR. If the impacts can be mitigated to a less than significant level, it's a mitigated negative declaration. And if all the impacts are less than significant, it is a negative declaration. That's pretty much a rare species. You hardly ever see them anymore. The only one I've ever prepared is for a water district, and the scope of work was to purchase land and maintain the land in its existing condition. It's the only time I've ever done a negative declaration. So CEQA requires significant impacts to be mitigated. This is where CEQA is a bit different than its counterpart at the national level, and the lead agency has a responsibility by state law to mitigate impacts to the point where clearly no impact would remain after the project. So you'll see those mitigation measures in mitigated negative declarations or EIRs. I'll go over this one briefly. There's at least 5 different ways to mitigate significant impacts. You avoid the impact, minimize, rectify, reduce, or compensate the impact on the environment. But to go into depth on this would be getting into the weeds. So prevailing in litigation for lead agencies, it's really about disclosing impacts on the environment. You'll see that in your environmental documents that accompany projects that require a CEQA document, and you only have to mitigate significant impacts. But here's where CEQA really bites. It really requires a commitment to actually mitigate impacts on the environment. So you want to see defensible mitigation measures that mitigate to the point where clearly there would be no less than significant impact on the environment. Now finally to your role in CEQA. Your role in CEQA is staff informs your decision, you decide, based on substantial evidence. I added that there because the administrative record needs to show what environmental documentation is supporting your decision. If there's anything you take away from the presentation this evening, take away this, that CEQA links land use decisions to the environmental impacts they would have. There's a bit of confusion out there about the purpose of CEQA, and one of the clearest messages is that CEQA documents are informational. They're not decisional documents. They're meant to inform the decisions you make, the land use decisions, not make the decisions themselves. The CEQA document doesn't recommend approval or denial of a project. It's simply there to inform your decision and to give the public the disclosure to understand what role that environmental analysis plays in the land use decision that you're making. So the CEQA notices and the agenda items that you'll see in your agenda reports, such as adopting an M&D or certifying an EIR, those are separate decisions from whether or not to approve or deny a project. It's really important. And so CEQA is about substantial evidence in the public record. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just back on. Thank you. That was very concise and very informative. That was an excellent report, thank you.
All right, so our next presentation is going to be on wireless facilities. And then following that, we'll do the Brown Act.
Good evening. Again, my name is Paul McLaren, Senior Planner. So earlier today, we had a wireless facility that went before the Planning Commission. We wanted to give you this training to give you some background to help to inform questions you may have and give you information on how we do get a lot of questions about 5G. We get a lot of questions about EME reports. We get a lot of questions about how things tend to work. And so we kind of wanted this presentation to help to give you that information and inform the questions that you would answer in the future. So ultimately, as you know, Commissioner Murphy spoke about earlier, is how many of these things are there eventually going to be? And this is really the drive here, is that, you know, they're saying ultimately that 5G is going to increase the U.S.'s gross domestic product by $1.3 trillion by 2030, and therefore the federal government and the state government have both said that this is of significant interest to our governments to make sure that we get there before anybody else. So that's kind of what's the driving force behind a lot of this. But the other driving force is the fact that, you know, these other statistics here is that more and more and more mobile devices are out there. More and more people are wanting to get on mobile devices. More people are going out and buying refrigerators and dishwashers and other things that are speaking directly to the internet, so that when you show up at the grocery store, your phone tells your refrigerator that you're at the grocery store, and then your refrigerator tells your phone that you only have a half a gallon of milk and it's going to expire in 2 days, and that's literally where the technology is going. So that's what the industry is trying to get ahead of. Like it or not, that's what the industry is trying to go, where the industry is trying to go. How does this actually work? Well, any wireless device is going to be run on EMF, which is electromagnetic frequencies. These electromagnetic frequencies are, we're going to go ahead and use the bad term that we never want to use, but it's radiation. Radiation is any of these frequencies, microwave radiation, ultraviolet radiation. That's really what it is. And, you know, ultraviolet will give you a sunburn, and you're being exposed to it every single day that you go out in the sun. Radio waves, when you listen to your radio in your car, you're getting radio waves. When you push the button on your remote at home, there are radio waves coming out of that remote control. Visible light that we have in this room right now is in this spectrum. But ultimately, the blue box down here is where wireless tends to live, although we are starting to get up here into what they call millimeter wave technology. We'll get into that a little bit later. But how this whole thing works is the federal government has set aside this blue box for telecommunications, and then they've auctioned it off to each one of the providers for billions of dollars for them to be able to use that particular frequency of spectrum. So T-Mobile ends up getting 800 hertz, and that's the only, well, 800 to 850, and that's their space, and so their devices can only broadcast within that range, which is why every single provider needs to have its own frequencies and therefore its own devices. It's, you know, T-Mobile and AT&T can't both use the same antenna because those antennas are going to have to broadcast per what they've bid on and what they've, you know, won in a specific, very specific frequency. Just a little bit more to know about this is, since 1972, the World Health Organization and a lot of other agencies have been looking at the effects of radiation on the human body. And this is just a quote. I'm not going to read it, but this is a quote from the World Health Organization. There's also this picture I have here that there are PET scans that are using millimeter wave technology to determine whether or not you have cancer. Pacemakers use millimeter wave technology. There's all kinds of medical technology that also uses radiation in these spectrums. The human body emits somewhere between 6 hertz and 16 hertz is about what our body is emitting on any given moment from the electrical things that are going on inside of our own bodies. On top of that, well, there's also the fact that, there's many stories about birds that are actually nesting right behind these wireless facilities. They're actually making these facilities to where they can't touch the bird nests under regulations because some of the birds are endangered species. And they're finding that the birds come back every single year. They lay their eggs, they have their children fly away safely, and they're doing this right on these wireless facilities. Going to some of the things that were said a little earlier, what the city cannot do. The city cannot deny a request to authorize the place, construct, modify wireless communication facilities based on the effects of radio frequencies to human health, to the extent that that facility complies with the FCC's regulations concerning those emissions. So what does the city do to ensure that this happens is we ask for that worst-case predictive modeling EME report in advance. We make sure that report is, a lot of times we are really trying to ask them for additions and changes and modifications to that report to make it as understandable to the general public as possible. But ultimately, what we're really looking for is we're also looking to see where it's got that one specific portion in the summary of that EME report that says that it is below the FCC's maximum permissible exposure. And then once the installation has happened and we've gotten a certificate of occupancy or the final approval on the facility, we will then give them 60 days and they have to come in with a field verified report from a company that says how that system is actually working. We send that off to a contractor, third-party contractor, who evaluates it for us, and they come back and tell us, yes, it matches the worst-case predictive modeling. They're within their guidelines and the FCC guidelines. So let's talk about technology for a minute, because this becomes a big question. So we start out with macro cells. What was approved tonight was a macro cell facility. These things broadcast a few miles. They cost a couple $100,000 to build, and they're basically the umbrella that covers the city to try to make sure that everybody gets a signal. Once we've started exceeding the capacity of these macro cell facilities, they're going to want to start to what they call densify the network, because the airwaves just can't handle too much signal, so they need to get it off the airwaves and into broadband or into fiber optics. So in order to do that, they'll start installing small cells. City of Camarillo only has one small cell. It's at Wood Creek and Santa Rosa Road. It's a single pole that you look up there, and it's a antenna sitting on top of it. That's the only small cell the city currently has. Everything else is macro cells. This building has actually got the femto cells in that you have a distributed antenna system, which is a DAS network is what they call them, and that would be the femto cells, and that's how you make sure that inside of a building you can help get wireless signals to all the phones on the inside of a building. So this is what I was talking about earlier when it comes to, right now, Dish Network, they're trying to densify their macro layer. They're trying to get in these really big towers that are going to cover a couple of square miles and cover all of Camarillo. Again, when capacity exceeds what these things are capable of doing, and there's really no room to build out, and they're having these pockets or certain areas like Constitution Park on, free concert night, where everybody's trying to record and use their cell phones and stream it live, we're going to get to a point where the towers can't handle that kind of volume. And so at that point, they're going to start asking for small cells, because the small cells will be able to pick it up, broadcast it to a macro cell, and then get it onto fiber and out to the network. So that's what we're going to see. But Camarillo, we're not really at that level of densification where we're getting small cells yet. So what is 5G? This is the big question. So I found this video. I'm going to try to make sure that it plays. I don't know if it's going to, but this is a really fantastic video that's going to help you to understand this a little bit better. Hopefully it's got sound. All right, so Unfortunately, it's not going to work. I kind of suspected that it might not. But
But as more
here
users
we
come
go.
online, 4G networks have just about reached the limit
All
of
right,
what
I'm
they're
going to start
capable
this over real quick.
Every new generation of wireless networks delivers faster speeds and more functionality to our smartphones. 1G brought us the very first cell phones, 2G let us text for the first time, 3G brought us online, and 4G delivered the speeds that we enjoy today. But as more users come online, 4G networks have just about reached the limit of what they're capable of at a time when users want even more data for their smartphones and devices. Now we're headed toward 5G, the next generation of wireless. It will be able to handle 1,000 times more traffic than today's networks, and it'll be up to 10 times faster than 4G LTE. Just imagine downloading an HD movie in under a second, and then let your imagination run wild. 5G will be the foundation for virtual reality, autonomous driving, the Internet of Things, and stuff we can't even yet imagine. But what exactly is a 5G network? The truth is, experts can't tell us what 5G actually is because they don't even know yet. But right now, there are 5 brand new technologies emerging as the foundation of 5G: millimeter waves, small cells, massive MIMO, beamforming, and full duplex. First up, technology number 1, millimeter waves. Your smartphone and other electronic devices in your home use very specific frequencies on the radio frequency spectrum, typically those under 6 gigahertz. But these frequencies are starting to get more crowded. Carriers can only squeeze so many bits of data on the same amount of radio frequency spectrum. As more devices come online, we're going to start to see slower service and more dropped connections. The solution is to open up some new real estate. So researchers are experimenting with broadcasting on shorter millimeter waves, those that fall between 30 and 300 gigahertz. This section of spectrum has never been used before for mobile devices, and opening it up means more bandwidth for everyone. But there is a catch. Millimeter waves can't travel well through buildings or other obstacles, and they tend to be absorbed by plants and rain. To get around this problem, we'll need technology number 2, small cell networks. Today's wireless networks rely on large, high-powered cell towers to broadcast their signals over long distances. But remember, higher frequency millimeter waves have a harder time traveling through obstacles, which means if you move behind one, you lose your signal. Small cell networks would solve that problem, using thousands of low-power mini base stations. These base stations would be much closer together than traditional towers, forming a sort of relay team to transmit signals around obstacles. This would be especially useful in cities. As the user moved behind an obstacle, his smartphone would automatically switch to a new base station in better range of his device, allowing him to keep his connection. Next up, technology number 3, massive MIMO. MIMO stands for multiple input, multiple output. Today's 4G base stations have about a dozen ports for antennas that handle all cellular traffic. But massive MIMO base stations can support about 100 ports. This could increase the capacity of today's networks by a factor of 22 or more. Of course, massive MIMO comes with its own complications. Today's cellular antennas broadcast information in every direction at once, and all of those crossing signals could cause serious interference. Which brings us to technology number 4, beamforming. Beamforming is like a traffic signaling system for cellular signals. Instead of broadcasting in every direction, it would allow a base station to send a focused stream of data to a specific user. This precision prevents interference, and it's way more efficient. That means stations could handle more incoming and outgoing data streams at once. Here's how it works. Say you're in a cluster of buildings and you're trying to make a phone call. Your signal is ricocheting off of surrounding buildings and crisscrossing with other signals from users in the area. A massive MIMO base station receives all of these signals and keeps track of the timing and the direction of their arrival. It then uses signal processing algorithms to triangulate exactly where each signal is coming from and plots the best transmission route back through the air to each phone. Sometimes it'll even bounce individual packets of data in different directions, off of buildings or other objects to keep signals from interfering with each other. The result is a coherent data stream sent only to you. Which brings us to technology number 5, full duplex. If you've ever used a walkie-talkie, you know that in order to communicate, you have to take turns talking and listening. That's kind of a drag. Today's cellular base stations have that exact same holdup. A basic antenna can only do one job at a time, either transmit or receive. This is because of a principle called reciprocity, which is the tendency for radio waves to travel both forward and backward along the same frequency. To understand this, it helps to think of a wave like a train loaded up with data. The frequency it's traveling on is like the train track. And if there's a second train trying to go in the opposite direction on the same track, you're going to get some interference. Up until now, the solution has been to have the trains take turns or to put all the trains on different tracks or frequencies. But you can make things a lot more efficient by working around reciprocity. Researchers have used silicon transistors to create high-speed switches that halt the backward roll of these waves. It's kind of like a signaling system that can momentarily reroute two trains so that they can get past each other. That means there's a lot more getting done on each track a whole lot faster. We're still working out many of the kinks with millimeter waves, small cell networks, massive MIMO, beamforming, and full duplex. In fact, all of 5G is still a work in progress. It will likely include other new technologies too, and making all of these systems work together will be a whole other challenge. But if experts can figure that out, ultra-fast 5G service could arrive in the next 5 years.
All right, so ultimately, the intent of that video was to help you to understand that, well, everybody seems to want to ask, is this particular device that's going to be coming in, is it going to be 5G? And ultimately, nobody really knows what 5G is yet. It's not even really defined yet. And most of this stuff is actually more software than it is technology that's being installed. So 5G is still something that is being developed. It's still something that is coming. Again, 5G is probably not in Camarillo yet because we're not starting to get the small cells. We don't have the capacity demand yet. But ultimately, if the market grows enough in Camarillo, they will want to start installing 5G in Camarillo. I'd like to talk next about some more of the technology, which is the antennas. There's typically two primary types of antennas. There's directional antennas, and these literally do what they say. They broadcast in a direction. These are the ones that are used in the macro sites. The one small cell site we have in Camarillo is using what they call an omnidirectional antenna, which can be whipped antennas or CAN antennas. So this is actually, some of you may be familiar with this particular EME report that came out, but this is just an example of one of the reports you will see, and it shows how these macro directional antennas actually broadcast. So they don't broadcast a single strength in every single possible direction. They broadcast with a specific strength in one particular direction. It's usually about 60-degree angle out from the antenna, and it's never deviates more than about 5 degrees to above and below. So these are really going from their location straight out. That's so that they can get out there and they can both intercept signals coming in and so that they can get their signals out there. But the effective radiated power on these things falls off very quickly, and that's what this is showing, is that if you were actually to go up onto this site, which is up on Las Posas, you could actually stand directly behind the directional antenna and get next to no effect. There are some little warnings saying stay back 5 feet or something, but you could stand there essentially and get no effect. But if you were standing directly in front of it in the yellow zone, you're getting up to 5,000 times the permissible exposure limits that the FCC allows. And then it goes out into the blue, and now you're down to somewhere between 100 and 500 times of the permissible. But then once you're out of the blue, you're below the permissible levels. And so if you actually were to extend the ground level out from this location, that beam where it's in that maximum permissible exposure level is 15 feet above your head. The only way that you're ever going to get up there is if you manage to get a ladder and climb up 15 feet and stand on top of the ladder. So that's one of the things that is going to help you, I hope, to understand when you're looking at the EME reports that are going to be attached to every single wireless facility that comes through across your desks. The report is also going to make these recommendations. So the Office of Engineering and Technology is part of the FCC. They came out with OET Bulletin 65, which was done in 1997, based on all that research that the World Health Organization and the American Medical Association and the CDC has done on wireless. And they've determined what is a maximum permissible exposure for the general population and what is a maximum permissible exposure for a controlled occupational, that would be the guy who goes up on top of the pole to fix the lights, the guy who goes on top of the roof to fix the AC equipment. That would be the occupational control exposure limit. And these emissions can actually be exceeded so long as they're not exceeded where it's going to be in the general population or general public uncontrolled exposure. And then when they're in the controlled areas, there's going to be warnings. So there's going to be a notification sign at the base of the light pole. You're going to get up on a roof, and before you open the hatch to the roof, there's going to be a notification that you're entering a roof that has wireless on the facility. And then as you approach the back of the facility, you're going to see signs like these caution signs. I physically go up on the roofs myself at the end of these installations and verify that these signs, as required by the EME report, are actually in place. I take pictures of them. So we're verifying that all of this stuff is actually there, that they're doing what they're supposed to. Honestly, you know, I think this is also fantastic because I don't know what you guys were doing when you were a teenager, but I was looking for roofs to climb up on and hang out on. We want there to be warnings because there is crazy things like that happen. So we do want, you know, these warnings to be there so that, you know, if a teenager were to get up there, they might freak out and decide that this isn't the best place for them to be. So understanding the EME report, the language here at the bottom is what you're really looking for, and that's where it's telling you exactly what the maximum permissible exposure is at different levels. Generally, what we want to look at is the very bottom one where it says at ground level, the maximum power density calculated for this particular antenna was 14.42% of the FCC's allowable limit for the general population exposure. So it's basically saying that, you know, at ground level, you're never going to get more than 14.42% of the maximum permissible exposure from this facility. Now, some people may say that any exposure is, you know, problematic, but right now we're all getting exposure. We're all getting exposure from the Wi-Fi in the building. We're all getting exposure from standing in front of the microwave waiting for our food to heat up. So that's where the FCC has come up with these numbers, that this is the maximum permissible exposure, that it's not going to have any permanent health effect on a human being. So then the EMA report is also going to have something that looks like this, which again is saying this is where you need to put all these notifications. This is where you need to put the signage in order to make sure that people are properly warned about the dangers that could possibly come from exposure at these high levels. And that's the end of my presentation. You're welcome.
I have to turn that on. Yeah, for me, I know this is one of the items that I'm not as knowledgeable as I would like to be. So something like this going through and breaking it down piece by piece, for me, is really helpful.
Yeah, I've been doing this. I started in Santa Monica writing their wireless ordinance, so back in 2013, so I've been doing this for 10 years, and that's the only reason that I know what I know about it is 10 years of research. So
Yeah,
it's not something that's easily caught on to. There's a lot of technology involved. There's a lot of science involved, so.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is not to say, okay, that we shouldn't ask the questions, because I understand that the public is also there, the public is listening. The questions can also, I know, sometimes be so that the public understands that we are doing the proper steps to protect them.
Okay. Anybody? Any questions? Okay.
That was very thorough, very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so our next presentation will be on the Brown Act, and then following that will be Planning 101, and that'll be our last training for tonight.
Good evening, Ms. Chairperson and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Justin Tamayo. I work in the City Attorney's Office, and I have 2 slides prepared this evening for you on the Brown Act as an introduction, a refresher for many of you. So the Brown Act is commonly referred to as open meeting law. When the legislature created it in the 50s, they said that councils and commissions exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. And so what the Brown Act requires is that any meeting of a legislative body be done openly and that all persons be allowed to attend. So with respect to attendance, any member of the public can address the commission on any item within its subject matter jurisdiction. The Planning Commission subject matter jurisdiction is going to be anything related to planning and zoning and land use. So anything in that area, the public can address the Planning Commission on. If you could do the next slide, please. So, as I previously mentioned, it applies to meetings of legislative bodies. The Planning Commission is a legislative body. Meeting is defined fairly broadly. You can see here on this slide it's broken down somewhat elementally, but a meeting is essentially a congregation of the majority of the members of the Planning Commission at the same time, place, and location to hear, discuss, or take action. Again, hear, discuss, or take action on any item within its subject matter jurisdiction. So, and this is going to include things like serial communications, which is going to be a series of text messages or a series of emails or social media posts. These things can all constitute a meeting that would violate the Brown Act. And the other last kind of pillar of the Brown Act is it prohibits the Planning Commission from taking action on any item that's not listed on the agenda. So this typically arises generally in the beginning of meetings. There's a time set aside for the public to address the commission on items not listed on the agenda. So this is kind of where it comes up. The commission can hear what the public has to say, but it cannot discuss or take action on it. Things that the commission can do in response to that, in those situations, you can make brief statements in response. You can ask clarifying questions. You can ask staff to analyze something and report on it in the future. You can ask staff to schedule something for a future planning commission hearing. Yeah, so that's a brief introduction and kind of refresher on the major pillars of the Brown Act. It's certainly not comprehensive, but I'm available to answer any questions the commission might have, whether it's now or in the future. You can always ask questions to the city attorney's office. And with that, I'll turn things back over to staff.
All right, I'm not going to have my back to you guys this time. So briefly before I start here, so what the hope here and the intent of the training is to just kind of give you guys the foundation and just kind of introduce you to all these topics, or for our veterans here, just to kind of as a refresher. And then the plan is that you take this information and in March go to the Planning Commissioners Academy and really kind of dive in and kind of choose those classes that you want more information on and ask those questions and network and see what other cities are doing on those topics. And really one of the things we like to say around here is have fun with it. So go out there and have fun with it. So I'm going to do a presentation on Planning Commission 101. I'm going to go over a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I will be available for questions, but just kind of bear with me here. So, all right, so Planning Commission 101. Oh, why isn't it? Maybe not.
Battery dead?
I need 5G, yeah, thank you. So kind of basically what I'm going to do is go over, brief overview of land use and local planning process. If you can do the next slide, please. So is there a way to turn this on? Anyways, okay. Oh, at least I got the laser pointer. Okay, so why do we need a local process or, have zoning, or what is the problem? Well, on the left, you can kind of see nice two-story house, nice neighborhood. But without, the proper land use controls and police power of the city, within a very short amount of time, someone could come in, propose a 20-story apartment complex literally right in your backyard. So can you do the next slide, please? So the problem continued. So we've used this picture several times. So we have an adult entertainment business next to a shopping center with high-rise office building in the back, all across the street from an elementary school. Probably not the best way to do it. You know, we have the adult uses there, have, you know, the traffic generated from those users of the office and the mall, and, you know, just having kids cross the street, you know, probably wouldn't be a good idea. So that would be another situation where a city could exercise their police powers. So next slide, please. So here's another one. Really feel bad for this homeowner here. They have a, you know, amusement park in their backyard. You can just imagine the light pollution that they have and the noise pollution. Hopefully they have a free annual pass. That's all I can say about that. All right, next one. Okay, so the authority to use the police of power, it goes back almost 100 years. So Amber Realty had some land in the village of Euclid, and back then, the industrial land was more valuable. So the city went ahead and implemented some zoning at that time and had some of Ambler's land zoned a variety of zoning districts. But really, they wanted all their land to be industrial. So they fought the city, and the court case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that no, the village has the right to implement their police power to grow the way they want to. So, and also in the California State Constitution grants cities the police power to exercise that right also. Next slide, please. So other key state authority for planning. My favorite is the first one, saying that you must have a planning department. So we like that one. And then it also says, you know, for you guys, we must have a planning commission. So, and it says that we need to have a general plan. And if we want, we can have specific plans. Because really, if you don't have a plan, it doesn't really matter which way we go. So we're told to plan for the future, and it's a good thing. So the zoning regulations basically will be the implementation tool for the general plan. And we're going to kind of get into all these a little bit more. And then the subdivision act, MAP Act, allows us to regulate the way that the land is subdivided within the city. So we don't end up with, you know, remainder pieces that can't be built, or, you know, kind of, you know, in the earlier cities you see like, oh, we're going to do it all in very small lots. So if you want a bigger lot, you just buy more lots. Or if you want a small lot, you just buy, you know, a couple lots. But then, you know, the city that I worked for in Minnesota, small rural town, they would have these little 25-foot skinny lots that people were trying to wedge houses on. So we have the ability to regulate, you know, the subdivision of land in our city. So then we've already heard about CEQA, where we mitigate the environmental impacts of a project, and then the Brown Act also. So that we have to follow. All this has to be, you know, discussed in an open, transparent environment for the public. So the hierarchy of our documents, the general plan's the top. It's kind of our vision for the future. Specific plan is more kind of a hybrid. It's really a fantastic tool that allows us to kind of blend the zoning and the general plan a little bit. But in the hierarchy, it's really, the specific plan is a mini general plan. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about these too. And then the zoning ordinance implements the programs of the general plan. And then we also have design guidelines, which are there to preserve the community character of the city. So now I'm more of a visual person, so I kind of have this slide here. So as we have the documents listed. The top, you know, of our police power is the general plan. It's more long-term, it's more general, you know, little detail. But as you move down, you know, specific plans, you know, it's not as long, but, you know, it's a decent amount of time, and it's got a little bit more information that we really want to focus, you know, in on a specific plan. We don't have any coastal plans, and then we have zoning kind of right here in the middle, which is the implementation tool, design guidelines. But as you can see, as we move down, you know, these are the permits here. So the Planning Commission will be operating most of the time here on the project approvals, where you have very short, very detailed, project-specific, you know, it's in this location, this is what they want to build, and this is the permit they're going to, we're going to consider on this. And then up here, these are more policy documents. So in this role, the Planning Commission would be a recommendation body to the City Council for these changes. So next slide, please. All right, the general plan. What the heck's the general plan? So general plan basically is the blueprint or our dream or, the constitution for all development. It's how we want to grow maintain, and maintain our city, for a specific period of time. So it's comprehensive, it's long-term, and we can look at land inside the city, and we can also look at land adjacent to our boundaries. Now, the general plan itself has several elements, and all the elements need to be, internally consistent. We can't have, say, in one element saying that we are, encouraging pedestrian movement and bike trails and, complete streets, with, where we have our automobiles, and then going to another element saying, oh, we don't want bikes on the streets, that's dangerous. So we have to be consistent with our direction that, we provide to the developers who want to make the investment in the city here. So the general plan is presumed valid. We're innocent until proven guilty. So, but if we are, if something is deemed invalid, it's a big problem because the Planning Commission will be making decisions on permits and findings based off this plan that is now deemed invalid, or some aspect of it is invalid. So it's very important to be consistent throughout the document. So next slide, please. So these are the 7 mandatory elements. It's kind of land use, and we talk about how we're going to use land, right now and in the future and in certain areas. Circulation, how we get around our city, and it's a variety of transportation. Housing, you might have heard of that one. I'll kind of get into it a little bit more. How, our needs for our community and how we're going to, house our population and our growing population over the next 8 years. And then we get a number from the state, called our RENA number. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. But and then, open space and conservation, we actually merge those two, how we want to maintain our open space and, conserve our natural resources and, bike trails and parks and hiking trails and all that stuff. And then noise and safety. But then the city of Camarillo goes above that, and we have 3 optional elements. So the curb, the urban regional restriction boundary, which is basically the city limit saying that we're going to focus all development inside in the city, and it's parallel with the SOAR, if you guys have heard of SOAR too. Community design, community is very important. Community design is very important in our city, and we really hammer home. And as you drive down the 101 or near the 101 within 500 feet or 1,000 feet of an intersection, you'll notice that all the buildings are designed very well, and we take pride of that. A couple examples. We have, probably, I like to say, the prettiest looking car wash in Ventura County. So we really want things to look nice. We open up, our backyard instead of walling off the 101, and so hopefully, people drive by and think, wow, what a nice community, and we want to preserve that. So that we actually, the city council actually had that baked into our plan to do that. And then also recreation. So, next slide, please. So the contents of the general plan, each element will have a vision, goal, policies, and standards. Next slide. So this is an example in our circulation element. The goal would be that have roadway network, and then we'd have a goal, an objective, and then also a city policy to support the objective and the goal. So next slide, please. So then we also provide a standard. Because, like I said, I like to have pictures and see it, and the more, guidance we can give them, the faster the people can get through entitlements and get the projects approved and start, investing in the community. So in this picture, we show, 6-lane road. The median's got to be a certain distance. We've got to have bike lanes and, sidewalks and landscaping and all that stuff. So we try to be upfront as possible on that. So next slide. And then this is just the circulation element map, which identifies the freeways, the primary arterials, and then kind of secondary and then major collector streets, in the city. So we kind of have a plan on how we're going to move traffic that way. So that's just an example. So the housing element. So this is something that James and I have been working on. James left. So on recently. So basically what state law says is that we have to update it every 8 years. So, and what that means is that we have to review our demographics and our housing needs for the city and implement policies that's going to promote the growth of the housing and to be able to accommodate the growth from the state, which is called the Regional Housing Allocations Need, which is 1,376 units over 8 years. We are one of the fortunate cities where we do not have to rezone property to accommodate this growth. We have it within our existing zoning. But one thing that when we sent it up to the state for certification, they said, well, you know this program here, 21, where you say you're going to do by right zoning on some of the sites that you used in your other housing element last 8 years? We want you to do that now. So we're scrambling. That's going to be coming to you very soon. It's a new overlay where if they meet certain requirements, they're allowed by right. So which that means is if they meet like the certain development standards in that zone, it would be done over the counter at the staff level, and that's being required by state law. So, but that more to come on that one. So, and then we also have to show the size. Basically, we have to plan for the housing. You know, we're gonna what type of housing, the need housing. We have to look at if there's any barriers for housing. You know, one of the things that we try to help facilitate housing is we have an RPD district, residential plan development districts, where the planning commission actually has the power to manipulate or adjust or be flexible on some of the development standards like setbacks to help make a good project go through if they're just short a little bit on a side yard setback or front yard setback. And then we also look for any barriers to housing production. So, and that's really more of we're doing that consistently. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, so jumping to the specific plan. So a specific plan is basically like a mini general plan. And like I said, it's a fantastic tool because we kind of give more direction to the development community on what we want there or what we need there. So we actually have, think of Village at the Park. We want to create this village, with this village commercial, and we want to have all these services here, and this is where we want them to go. This is where we want this type of housing to go. And we can be very, we can be more specific, site specific in that. Where, if you kind of remember the general plan is kind of a little bit more general. Here, it's a fantastic tool to really focus in on that. And then it is in the hierarchy, it's still higher than zoning. So the zoning still needs to be consistent with the specific plan. Next slide, please. So these are the 10 specific plans that we have in the city. Most of them are along the 101 corridor, right in here. Here's Village at the Park here. Here's Springville, which is our one that's being built out right now. Next slide, please. Okay, zoning. So basically, as I mentioned, zoning implements the vision of the community or the general plan. So, and in here, we consolidate all the rules and regulations into one comprehensive document, so you don't have to chase it all over. We have it in all housed there. So, and what it does is it basically provides more of the site-specific development standards. What are the setbacks? In this area, this building needs to be set back 20 feet. It can, it can only cover 50% of the lot coverage. It needs to have, so much land, 10% landscaping. So this is where we really kind of get into the nitty-gritty, of the project itself, down to the basically like the parcel level. And we can regulate the height, because like that picture showed, we don't want a 20-story apartment complex right next to a single-family house. And then we have the ability through our policing powers to separate the city into appropriate zones. Now I have kind of a picture here, the next slide, showing how we can see, spread them out. So instead of just saying residential, we can say, well, this is single family, this is multifamily, and we want commercial over here, and we want the multifamily next to the lake. That's what we could do. And then, as I mentioned, each one of these sub areas, or different residential areas have their own unique setbacks and requirements, which could be more or less than the other residential zones. So it's all unique, and it's, trying to really focus in on what we want there, what the general plan or what the vision of the community is for that area. So, and again, since zoning is lower in the hierarchy, it must be consistent with the general plan, and if there's obviously a specific plan there, they have to be consistent with that. And, we're humans, we evolve, we change, and so do our cities. So as we want our cities, as our cities evolve and we want to make a change, we have the ability to do that. So next slide, please. So in order to enact a text amendment for the zoning, it can be initiated by the Planning Commission, City Council, or the members of the public. So we just recently changed our code there, so anyone can come in and request a text change. So, but you guys, as planning commissioners, have that authority to do that. If you think something's should be changed, you can call for that item, have a public hearing, and make a recommendation to the city council. You guys would just be the recommendation body, and the city council would be the policymaker, so they would actually say yes or no on that. But you have that ability. So in the process for that, so once it's initiated, it goes to this Land Economic Development and Land Use Committee, which is made up by 2 city council members. And they review the change, and then they don't direct, they guide staff, saying, well, we're kind of thinking this. It's only 2 of them, though. So there's still other members of the policy body that would have to weigh on it. But then we take it to them, and then they give us some direction, or guidance, excuse me, and then we bring it to you guys for the Planning Commission to review. And if you have any changes, we can look at that, and then make the recommendation to the City Council for the change. So go ahead, next slide, please. So, and then just some other important land use regulations. So we have Title 18, which is our subdivisions. Kind of mentioned it before. So we have the tract maps and parcel maps. So if the subdivision is going to create more than five or more lots, they need to go through the tract map process. And what that process is starts out, staff reviews it, comes to the Planning Commission for recommendation, and then it would go to the City Council for approval. And the difference between tract maps and parcel maps is the Planning Commission, you guys have the authority to approve that without going to the City Council. But under the parcel map, that's 4 or less lots. So if we have a project coming in where they want to split, one big lot into 2 lots and do developments on both of them, that would you guys would have the authority to approve that. It wouldn't go to the City Council. Lot line adjustments, that's at the staff level. So if it's 4 or less lots, we can kind of work them to move the lots around, or the lot lines around a little bit, as long as it's not creating more lots. And then they would, all the maps and the lot line adjustments would be recorded with the county. So we do have something, what's called the Development Control, or Title 20. I don't know, Commissioner Murphy, if you remember this, if you were still on the board when we had the RDEB, the regional, or the Residential Development Evaluation Board. But and what we do there is the developers would have approvals, project approvals, but before they could pull permits, we would rank them because we wanted the best project. So we look at design and affordable housing, and we'd re-rank them to say, okay, well, we think we should give the allotments to these group, projects first if it's oversubscribed. And we only gave out so many, allotments per year. But the reason I don't have anything on here is because the state has said that we're in a major housing crisis, and we cannot slow down the development of housing until 2030. So this it's not even, we won't have this for a while. It's still there, it's still on the books, but we are suspended from implementing this from the state. So, all right, so switching gears to design, there's really 2 kinds of design that I kind of want to break it out to. So we have the guidelines, and then we have the design standards. And they're very different. So the guidelines are open to interpretation, encourages innovation, and it's kind of a broad area, and it's usually, you know, in a single document. For standards, they have to meet. It's just really black and white. So they're required, they have to do it, they have to have the setback. It really doesn't encourage innovation, and they're very site-focused, where the guidelines are like, the Heritage District in our community design guidelines, they're saying, oh, along the highway, you know, excuse me, the 101 corridor, we want to have this beautiful design. Excuse me. So examples of the design guidelines, you know, we'd say stuff like, oh, you maintain the community character of, you know, the neighborhood, or choose from this color palette. You know, have a variety of, you know, roof shapes and siding and texture. Next slide. And then we'd have a color palette like this, and then showing, you know, the textures, and we have the brick, and we have the stone, and we have stucco, and different things that they can pick from for their project. So, next slide. Oh, excuse me. And then more of the design standards are more of the setbacks, the lot coverages, number and size of parking stalls that we're requiring on site, allowable landscape materials is very specific, and they really can't deviate from that. I mean, there are some rare occasions where, like I mentioned, we have that RPD permit that you guys can adjust them. Excuse me. But most of the cases we can't. All right, so definitely need to take a drink of water for this one. The planning process. All right, Paul, I'm ready. So this is what it kind of is in a nutshell. So you start up here, and you bounce around, come over here, and it says increase alcohol use. And then you kind of go around here, and it switches green because that means you're getting close. But then you could be kicked out again. And that says decrease alcohol use here. So, and as you get through here, and finally, this is planning commission, and you go back to staff, or you get your project approved. So obviously this is a joke. But, so this is what really happens here. So we pride ourselves on being on customer service and being very informative and helpful, and we're always trying to streamline development. So this is kind of it in a nutshell. So even before an applicant submits their application, they come to our counter, and we have consultations, and we talk to them, and we say, you know, they're like, well, what do you think about this? And we give them feedback, and then if they want more, feedback from the city, we can actually schedule a meeting with them where we can get people from other divisions or departments to come in, and we just talk about their project. What do you think? Oh, we think about, we think this. If you do this, we think that this is what you need to kind of think about. And then if it's like a more, larger scale project, let's just say a big, retail development or a new shopping center or something like that, they can do what's called a pre-app, where we route that to all, like the county for the county fire and Caltrans, and we route it all over the place and get comments from other jurisdictions and departments in the city. But and really they'll give the feedback there. That's more formal, but that's really reserved for a very big project that may have a lot of considerations. But when the project is submitted here, we send it out for what's called completeness review. So we send it to all the other jurisdictions and city departments, and like I mentioned, the county, and we said, we have this project. Let us know if it meets your requirements, and we get back to the applicant within 30 days. So within 30 days, they get back to us. If it's incomplete, well, first, I don't even want to say it's incomplete. Let's say if it's complete, it's awesome. And they go straight into the Development Advisory Conference, where we sit down with them and we say, okay, your project has been deemed complete, you meet all the development standards, and now at the DAC, or Development Advisory Conference, we said, these are all your project conditions of approval. And we'll kind of get into conditions of approval a little bit more, but these are all things you're basically going to have to do, or this is your roadmap. You have to do all these things by this time. And then we have all the divisions there and departments, and if there's any questions, we answer them right there on the spot. If we don't know the answer, we get back to them right away. And then once the applicant says, hey, I'm good with this, then we schedule it for the planning commission, and then that's when it comes to you guys. Now, if they don't meet all the development standards of the city or the county or, fire department, county fire, whoever, they go into this incompleteness where we send them a letter saying, everything looks good, but you need to do X, Y, Z. So then they go back to their project and incorporate the changes, and then we go back into the 30-day completeness review. So, and then once it's complete, we go to the planning commission. Now, most people think that that's the end of it. Yay, we did it, we're done. But that's just really about halfway through, maybe a third of the way through. So after the public hearing, there's a 10-day appeal period where someone could appeal the project or appeal the decision to the city council. So there's a CEQA document, there's also a waiting period for that also. But then they need to go, and we go into this realm called condition compliance and plan check. So condition compliance, it's amazing. So when the planning commission approves a project, it looks all nice, and you have all this architectural detail stuff, and then when they submit for their building permit, they're like, I thought there were arch windows here instead of just, the normal standard square. Oh yeah, that's just too expensive. Well, you can't do that because this is what the planning commission approved. So we go through rounds because it's too expensive. Well, then we have to go back to planning commission because now you change your project. So it's an educational process, but things always change. And when they're in the plan check process, there's also a submittal to Tally's department where they go through their grading plan check. So they need to do that, and then once they have their grading permit and they have a certified pad, then that's when they can pull their building permit. But before they can pull their building permit, they have to go through plan check with building and safety, and that's where we kind of pick up like all the changes that they want to cut out, that they don't want to do because it looks good, but it's more expensive, or they can't do something for whatever reason. The project changes, and we have to make sure we catch that, so we approve the right. So the approved project is the one that's built. Then once they're ready to pull their building permit, they start the construction. So the city has inspections both on the public works side and the community development side, and we make sure that not only are they building what was approved and what we issued the building permit for and the public improvements that they plan on doing, they're actually constructing in the field because things change when you get out in the field. And one of the first things I learned when I was going out there looking at project condition of compliance is this wall is going like this, and I'm like, hey, that's supposed to be a 6-foot wall. Well, yeah, but it's going down a slope, so it's only 5 feet here, but it's 6.5 here, and then it's 5 and 7 inches over here. So it's things change. You're constantly making it work because you got to kind of put it into the field. So, and then at the very end when they're ready, they're done, the project is built, and they want to move in, we do a compliance inspection. So they come in and we give them, all right, now all these people that had conditions of approval on this project, you need to have them sign off on it, and they go check out the property, make sure that everything's finally done and ready to go. And then once we sign off on that, they get what's called a certificate of occupancy, meaning they can occupy the building. So from public hearing, planning commission, there's still a lot of work that they need to do. So sometimes projects are approved and never get built. So we do have some of those on the books too. So, and that's why. So just to kind of, almost done here, just kind of touch a little bit on the agenda and the hearing. So we kind of walked through the agenda. you guys saw that earlier today, so I kind of won't touch on that. But the two big decision points will be in discussion items and in public hearings. So they're kind of the same, but they're kind of different. So both of them have a staff report, both of them will have planning commission consideration, both will have public input. However, one by law will require what's called a public hearing. So I kind of mentioned that we're very transparent here, and we go above and beyond what's required. So the public hearing would be a notice hearing in the paper. It's on our website. It's mailed out to 600 feet, or property owners within 600 feet of the project area. State law only requires 300, but we don't stop there at 600. We actually, if there's our neighborhood here and it stops here, there's no reason why we cut it off at a neighbor's property line, because thinking that, oh, they're not affected, they're outside the 600 feet. Well, of course they're affected, because they're still going to be going this way and driving through the property. So we extend it to what makes sense geographically. These people are going to be affected by it. We're going to notice them, even if it's 1,000 feet out. And then in addition to that, if there's an HOA, we send it out to the HOA, and then they can disseminate the information there too. So we try to get the information out, because what we don't want to have happen, and it still happens sometimes, but people come up and go, I never heard anything about this. But in our agenda reports, we list out exactly what we've done to get the word out. And there'll always be someone, who'll come and do that every once in a while. And then speaking about agenda reports, so that's the information that we are providing to the Planning Commission to base the decision off of. So it's our analysis basically showing how we looked at the project. It includes the applicant's information, the site location, the environmental determination on that we think either exempt or it's some kind of environmental document, the noticing, the background on the site, if there's any other permits that have been developed or that have been approved on there, or if it's a modification, we talk about what the other, the initial permit was, and then this is the fourth modification to add this. It says that the Planning Commission has the right to approve it because it's, a conditional use permit, or, if it's a new building, it would be, it could be like a permitted use, but it's a new building, so it's come to you guys for approval. And in there, so very important are the findings. So, and this kind of ties back to our general plan must be consistent, and we need to have, make sure that we're making findings on a consistent document. So we need to find or make the findings or state that how this project complies with the findings on that are required. So one of the examples I think is the next slide here. So basically, this is from our conditional use permit. I'm not going to read this, but basically, we have to make findings, for A through E. And the first one is it's an allowed use in there with conditional use permit. Therefore, it meets this finding. It's necessary for the development. It's harmonious with the neighborhood because it's well designed, and it meets all the development standards and the zoning. It won't be detrimental to the neighborhood because it meets all the development standards. So we always try to have a because in there to explain why. We're satisfying these findings. So, and the findings must be supported by evidence in the record, and that's kind of where I was going with the agenda report. So we can only make decisions at the Planning Commission level based on the record, based on the information that you have before you, that's in the application file or the agenda report, the studies that are sent out in your packet, and the public comments on that item. So if it's not in the record, we can't really just say, I don't like red, so I'm going to not approve it. It doesn't meet it, So, and then, so conditions of approval, I kind of mentioned that a little bit. What is a conditional approval? It's basically a requirement that the city's putting on the projects to make sure that is all the conditions of all the requirements in the municipal code are satisfied, and because they come at a later time. And it must support a legitimate public purpose. So the condition of approval we have, can't deny the economic use of it, just saying, oh, well, I don't think that's good use there, so we can't do it. It has to, allow the economic use of the property. So if it's commercial and they come in, they want to do a retail store and it's an allowed use, we really can't, without putting the city at liability, say no. If they meet all the development standards, it's an allowed use there. It's in the zoning, it's allowed, and we cannot deny them that use. Now, and any special condition must have a nexus. It needs to be, connected to the project for somehow, some way. So, the project, must incorporate the Spanish design in our heritage zone. So, that would be like an example. And it has to be proportionate to the project. So for example, if we have one vacant lot on a corner and it's just slammed with traffic, it's just terrible, and it's an level of service F, we can't make them upgrade that entire intersection. They would be responsible for their portion or their use of the infrastructure, for example. All right, next slide, please. So where do they come from? As I kind of mentioned, we have standard conditions of approval that we just kind of tack on to projects, and we also have special conditions of approval which are unique to that project. So we might have a situation where there's commercial next to residential, and they come in and they want to do a bar. So they're allowed to do that with, let's just say hypothetically, with a conditional use permit, which just allows us to put conditions on the project. And we could say, hey, look, it's a residential area. We want to limit the time that they are open. Or, let's look at, let's just say a grocery store next to residential. We want to limit the time that they can make deliveries in the morning. So we don't want deliveries happening at 4:30 in the morning, because they're loud, and when those things back up and they're beeping, and people are back there, it wakes up people, that are nearby, and then they start calling the city and stuff. So, and they have the right to enjoy their property too, and that would be kind of a code violation. So we have the authority to mitigate those uses to ensure that they do not. That they're not detrimental to adjoining uses. So, and then if the commission wants to change staff's recommendation or a condition, you guys have the ability to do that. I would just say that a couple of things. So if a change is desired, because in the past I have heard, oh, well, I think they should do this, but then it's not mentioned again. And if it's not mentioned in the motion, it's just a comment, and it's not a direction to staff to actually change it. So if there's a change that you want done, it has to be part of the motion, seconded and voted on. So if they want to do that. And if you plan on doing that, let us know, so we can make sure that there is a nexus and it's proportional to the project, or whatever it is, just so we kind of have a heads up and we can loop in Justin right away, so to help us with that. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm sorry, that was kind of a lot of information. This would probably be a couple years at planning school when you could dive in on all this stuff. But I'm always available for questions. Our staff is great here. We actually appreciate the questions in advance. So please don't think you're bothering us at all. Either email, give me a call, or just swing by. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just had one on that redab thing where the
RDEB?
state trumped that. Did that just happen this year?
No. So that happened in 2020.
Okay.
And they initially sunsetted, or it was from 2020 to 2025, and it was set to sunset. And they recently extended it again so it wouldn't sunset in 2025 to 2030.
Wow.
So we won't have that in this next 4 years.
Is there, when you were talking about some of the changes a while back in the presentation, did I read something about a new bill about residential going in industrial areas and having to be approved or not?
So it's in there, kind of, it's in commercial. So
Commercial areas?
It's a commercial. So that's one of the things that we'll be bringing to you guys, because we have to change our code on that. And I think that one goes into effect July 1. So we still have some time on that.
Okay.
But yeah, there's, I think, 41 housing bills, and 9 of them or 11 of them are requiring changes to our code. So we're going to be busy.
Yeah.
We'll keep you guys on your toes.
Some of them are pretty scary.
Yeah.
So.
They're interesting. We'll say that for sure.
Yeah, and listening to you when you're talking about changes in their plans as they go along the way, it just, personally, it just reminded me in the assessor's office when we would get custom homes. We have the blueprints, and you go out to measure it and look at it, and it's like, wait a minute, this is like, there's another 500 square feet here or something. Oh, no, we changed that.
Yeah, we try to slip something in a little bit or change a little bit of something.
Yeah. Very different. Any other questions over here?
Very good.
Okay. Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Quite a window in going to the conference in March. So, okay. Let me see if I can figure out where we are. I kind of buried my stuff. I closed my book, I moved it. I don't know where my agenda is. Here, look. I need my color one. Okay. So then, do we have a director's report?
Yeah, so would like to inform the Planning Commission that our next meeting is scheduled for February 28th, which we have several items, big items. It's going to be a big meeting, so.
Okay, so be prepared to,
We'll try to get that information out as soon as possible, but, we'll do what we can to give you a little bit more time, if we can, to give you a little bit more time to review it. And then also to just remind the Planning Commission that we do have our Planning Commission Academy in March coming up. I highly encourage everyone to go. So that's a good
Okay.
time.
all right. And commissioner comments? Anybody want to chime in? Sure. Okay.
Happy to be here, looking forward to everything that's ahead. You just put a fire hose in front of me and asked me to take a sip, so that was greatly appreciated. But I do appreciate very much the way the city is run. It's one of the things that my wife and I love about Camarillo is the commitment that everybody who works at the city has. And believe me, it's felt. And I bring that message from neighbors and people alike. It's really felt that this city is not only well managed and run, but cared for.
Thank you.
It's an honor to serve on the commission. I look forward to working with all of my fellow commissioners and really thank the staff for all of the time that you've put into preparing us and in doing all of the presentations tonight and staying so late. And I understand that some people haven't had dinner, your families and pets are waiting. So just a gratitude for your dedication. I look forward to getting to know all of you and working very closely. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to welcome Rob and Gladys to the commission. Very excited about working with you and having the 5 of us move on into 2023. It'll be a great year. Thank you for introducing us to the new staff and congratulations on the promotions that we learned about tonight as well. Mitchell, Paul, Justin, David, thank you very much for those presentations. It was a lot of information in a short period of time, and it's kind of nice to have all of that in front of us. I want to talk a little bit more about that chart that had all the red lines and the green lines and the interconnecting, but we'll go through that later. Okay.
I want to know who put all those lines, managed to get them all on one sheet.
Very nice diagram.
Yeah, thank you, staff, for the great presentation. I always pick up new things, no matter how many times we have gone through this with the academy. I appreciate that, and welcome our new members. Look forward to working with you guys, and probably time to adjourn, isn't it? Past our bedtime? Yeah.
And I want to welcome to Rob and Gladys, and looking forward to, a great year this coming up. And to the staff, this was a great change in, a first night presentation and meeting the staff, going through some of the basics. Quite a difference from, like 4 years ago, and I really appreciate all the effort that went into this, because this is really a nice introduction and a reminder also. So thank you very much for that. And if there's nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.